Ever wondered who would win in a fight between two of history's greatest conquerors, Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan? It's the ultimate historical showdown. One, the Macedonian king who carved out an empire from Greece to India before he was 33. The other, the Mongol warlord who united nomadic tribes and forged the largest contiguous land empire ever seen. Welcome to Historic Warlands. Subscribe to support the channel and help us bring you more fascinating war-related stories. Let's break it down, general by general, army by army, and see how this epic clash might unfold. First, let's look at the commanders themselves. Alexander was a frontline general, a charismatic leader who fought alongside his men. He was a tactical genius, famous for his bold, decisive actions. Think of the Battle of Gaugamela, where he charged straight at the heart of the massive Persian army. He inspired incredible loyalty and would lead from the very front, risking his own life to secure victory. His style was all about seizing the moment, using brilliant, sometimes risky, maneuvers to shatter his enemy's morale. Genghis Khan, on the other hand, was a master strategist and organizer, but he rarely fought on the front lines himself, especially later in his career. He was more like a modern general, directing his forces from a command post, using a sophisticated system of messengers to coordinate vast armies across huge distances. His genius wasn't just in battle, but in the meticulous planning before it. He used espionage, psychological warfare, and deception on an unprecedented scale, often winning battles before they even began. He'd make his enemies think his army was smaller, then encircle them. He'd spread terror to make cities surrender without a fight. So you have Alexander, the inspirational battlefield virtuoso, versus Genghis Khan, the calculating grandmaster of strategy. It's a classic clash of styles. Now, let's talk about their armies. Alexander's force was the Macedonian phalanx, a terrifying wall of soldiers wielding 18-foot-long spears called sarissas. This formation was nearly unstoppable from the front. Supporting the phalanx were his elite companion cavalry, arguably the best heavy cavalry of the ancient world. Alexander would use the phalanx to pin the enemy army, then deliver a knockout blow with his cavalry, the classic hammer and anvil tactic. His army was a well-oiled professional fighting machine, disciplined and incredibly effective in set-piece battles. Genghis Khan's army was entirely different. It was composed almost entirely of cavalry, specifically Mongol horse archers. These weren't heavily armored knights. They were light, incredibly mobile warriors who grew up on horseback. They could shoot their powerful composite bows with deadly accuracy while riding at full gallop. Their main tactic was the feigned retreat. They'd pretend to run, luring their overconfident enemies into a disorganized chase, and then turn and shower them with arrows, encircling and destroying them. The Mongol army was a fluid, decentralized force that valued mobility and firepower over heavy armor and static formations. So, how would these two armies fare against each other? Imagine the scene. Alexander sets up his phalanx, a solid, impenetrable wall of spears. The Mongol horse archers would likely swarm around it. They wouldn't charge head-on. That would be suicide against the sarissas. Instead, they would ride in circles, just out of spear range, relentlessly firing arrows into the Macedonian ranks. The phalanx was strong from the front, but vulnerable on its flanks and rear. Alexander would have to use his companion cavalry to drive off the Mongol horse archers. This is where it gets interesting. The companion cavalry were heavy shock troops, designed for a decisive charge. The Mongol horses were lighter and faster. The companions might charge, but the Mongols would likely just retreat, firing as they went the famous Parthian shot. It would be a frustrating cat-and-mouse game for Alexander's heavy horsemen. The terrain would be a massive factor. On an open, flat plain like the steppes of Central Asia, the advantage swings heavily to Genghis Khan. The mobility of his horse archers is supreme. They could dictate the terms of the engagement, harass the Macedonians, cut off their supply lines, and wear them down over days or even weeks. Alexander's army, which relied on infantry and logistics, would be far from its supply bases and vulnerable. The Mongols were masters of living off the land, while Alexander's men would struggle. But what if the battle took place in a more confined space? Say, in a narrow valley or a forested area in Europe or Anatolia. Here, the Mongols' mobility would be limited. Alexander could anchor his flanks against a river or a mountain, preventing the Mongols from surrounding him. In this scenario, the sheer power of the phalanx and the decisive charge of the companion cavalry could be devastating. If Alexander could force a direct confrontation, his disciplined, heavy troops could potentially break the lighter Mongol cavalry. And let's not forget technology. Alexander's army had siege engines like catapults and ballistas, which were revolutionary for his time. Genghis Khan's army, however, came 1,500 years later. The Mongols were masters of siege warfare, not because they invented new machines, but because they captured engineers from the lands they conquered, especially from China and Persia. They had access to traction trebuchets and possibly even early gunpowder weapons like fire lances. In a siege, the Mongols would have a clear technological edge. The composite bow used by the Mongols was also a far superior weapon to the bows available in Alexander's time. It had greater range and power and could punch through the armor of a Macedonian soldier. Ultimately, this isn't a battle that can be decided with a single clear winner. It's a clash of eras and philosophies of war. Alexander was the master of the decisive battle, seeking to shatter his enemy in a single glorious engagement. Genghis Khan was the master of the long campaign, using strategy, logistics, and attrition to grind his enemies into dust. If Alexander could force a set-piece battle on ground of his choosing, his tactical brilliance and the brute force of his army might carry the day. But if the battle were fought on the Mongols' terms, on the wide-open plains, Genghis Khan's strategic depth and the relentless mobility of his army would likely be overwhelming. It's a testament to their greatness that even centuries apart, we can imagine them as worthy opponents. It asks the ultimate question of military history. Does the perfect tactical hammer beat the unstoppable strategic wave? We'll never know for sure, but it's fascinating to think about. Thanks for watching the Historic War Lens. If you enjoy diving deep into historical what-ifs like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me know in the comments who you think would have the edge and why.